When it comes to telemetry and logging, there are multiple options available in Microsoft Azure and their partner ecosystem. Today, Mike looks at the use cases for log analytics, application insights, and serverless 360 BAM. What are these products about? What are the pros and cons of each solution? And in what scenarios do they fit in? Let's not wait any longer. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Cecil. That was a really nice introduction there. I feel like I've just been accepted onto stage to get an award or something. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So I hope everybody's having a really good conference. It's great to see them recognise a lot of names. Sorry we can't have a bit of chat at the conference and stuff. I missed that quite a lot. But today's session, something I've been kind of looking at in quite a bit of detail for a while, and I'm hoping there's some really good stuff in here that people can take away and use pretty much straight away, but also it might give people some thoughts about stuff that they have available, but they haven't really just thought about, like what they can do with it, kind of thing. So in the session, I want to talk a little bit about log analytics, app insights, and BAM. Saravana talked a little bit about BAM in the last session, and I'll just show a use case on that. And really, everything I'm talking about in today's session is based on stuff I'm doing on real world projects at the minute. For anybody who hasn't met me before, so I think I'm 12 years now as an MVP. I've worked in the BizTalk space originally, but I've been working in the Azure space pretty much since it went live. So I've done loads of Azure across many different companies. I'm based up in Newcastle in the UK, so I think I've noticed that there's a couple of people based up in the Newcastle area that I spotted earlier in the week. So if you are local, feel free to drop me a line, because there's not really many of us up here, and it's always good to have kind of colleagues in the local area. So I'm mainly a freelance cloud architect. I help companies on integration solutions and Azure solutions. And I'm also an advisor to Serverless 360. So I help a lot with product strategy, product direction, and some of the cool features that we've got. There's also a couple of community projects. So I do a lot of blogging, my URL's there. I also curate the integration playbook. So there's loads of great content about different aspects of integration and the Microsoft tech stack. I guess the one I'm missing is probably the integration user group. So Lex and I were doing Integration Monday. I guess we had a bit of a break, kind of one of the side effects of the challenges of online stuff, but I think we probably should get back to that soon. So today's agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about a scenario, and then basically what I've done is I've got the same demo done 4 different ways to show the way each technology can help you with that. And then, so we're going to go through each of the demos, and then I'm going to do a wrap up, just talking about some of it at the end. Now, what I've also done in addition to today's session, the integration playbook has a walkthrough for each of the demos, where I go basically through a lot of the detail, show a lot of the stuff you can do, and it's really meant to go side by side with today's session. So the session scenario is going to be based around, if anyone remembered Integrate a few years ago, I did this demo about Nothing But Unicorns, which was at the time was a real company where you could buy a unicorn, which I think, if I remember right, it Integrate 2018, 2019, something like that. Sam Van Out bought a unicorn while we were at the conference from the website, and it went through the system, and he eventually got a unicorn. But since then, I kind of stopped that business because it was a bit of fun, but it was too much hard work. But some of the Azure stuff I did in the background was still quite good to play with. So let's pretend we've got Nothing But Unicorns has got a toy factory that make unicorns, and they get supplies delivered by suppliers who send them CSV files saying, here's what we've sent you. And we're going to have a look at an integration solution that might process those receipt files and kind of load them into a Power App so we can see the data and do stuff. But we're really going to focus on the integration solution and how App Insights, BAM, or Log Analytics can give you different perspectives on your solution. So if you think this is the conceptual view, under the hood, we've got this idea that our partner over on the left sends us a file. We've got a logic app who's going to process that file, debatch it, and write the messages within the batches onto an event hub. We've then got a second logic app that picks up from the event hub, and it does the integration into Dataverse to load the data in, and we'll have a Power App that we can view the data in. And just to simulate what the partner does, I've got another logic app, excuse me, down the bottom here, which will just dummy up sending the message in. Now, what I've done is I've basically got the 4 demos constantly running. So I think it's about every 4 or 5 hours, each of them will kick off a new process. So I've had a stream of data coming through every day, just so it's got some data for us to look at and kind of help showcase some of the technologies. So if we take a quick look at the Power Apps, so if we drop out of here and go over into my Power Apps platform, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Power App. It's really simple. I've just got a list of all of the different ingredients we've received. You can see there's a Power App graph thing here, shows us the quantity of each thing. And, obviously unicorns are made of things like sparkles and magic dust and stuff like that. So that's the ingredients that our suppliers send us. And what we're really going to do is, I'm just going to, for ease of jumping backwards and forwards, jump into the slides here. So we're going to just step through each of these different ways we can implement this. So if we start off with the sort of logic apps out of the box log analytics integration that we've had this for quite a while. It was talked about it integrate a few years ago, and it's something we can use today. And really, what we're going to do is we're going to configure logic apps to send data to a log analytics workspace, and then we can do some stuff with that. So over in Azure here, you can see I've got my 4 resource groups here. I've got one for each demo. And the first one is this logic apps out of the box log analytics setup. So what I've done is I've set up the batch receivers, this one here, and he would basically just receive the message, he debatches it, goes through each of the items and writes it to an event hub. Just move that out of the way. And we've got the second logic app, which is this load to Dataverse, where he'll basically pick the message up off the event hub. He'll go and check whether the account for the customer exists, and then he'll check. And if we've got a condition where the account does exist, we'll load that in. So you'll see there's a create new record down here, and we'll have an error condition if it doesn't. Now, I think from the perspective of setting the scene, the thing that we've got in logic apps that's really good is if you want to look at one individual logic app, you've got all this history that you can go into. You can find the one, you can step through what happened, you can see the details of each individual shape. So that's really good. But the problem is well, I've got, probably going back a month now, I've probably got a few hundred logic apps that have ran. Which one is the one that I need to check? Which one's the one that had the problem? And it's working out which logic app I need to look at. It's one of the biggest challenges. But there's a whole other bunch of things that are challenges in supporting real world solutions with logic apps, where it's more than just we've ran one logic app and can check the history. So if we think about what we're going to do with a logic app to connect it to the log analytics workspace, we've got these diagnostic settings down here. And you can see here, so I've got in my resource group, I've got this log analytics workspace here, and I was able to set up a connection to that log analytics workspace. You can see I've sent the metrics and the runtime events. And then whenever my logic app runs, there's going to be a whole load of information gets sent into log analytics, and I can do some stuff with it. So if we go over here and we have a look inside log analytics, so the thing Microsoft gave us was this logic apps management solution. And if we open it up, you can see you get this preview of what's going on. You get some high level stuff. Microsoft had talked about this in the past a little bit, so I don't want to spend a lot of time sort of revisiting old ground, but just if you get the point that there is some stuff here that you can do, you can see some of these logic apps, you can see the tracked properties, so you can see here's some info from my ones that have ran now. I think there's cases where this solution was all right, does some stuff in the real world, but I think I tended to find that it was the login stuff under the hood that was more useful. So one of the things we could do is if we actually just looked in the raw logs themselves, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can see. So I'm going to just bring a query across here. I'll bring this. So you can see here that the workflow runtime events, you can start actually having a look what's going on. And you can see you get events for things like come and tells you what resource group it came from, which shape in your logic apps. You can see that was from an event trigger. And there's a whole bunch of information that you can use here to kind of mine what happened in your logic app. Now, one of the challenges with it is if I bring another query in, you actually get a lot of data gets logged here. So if we have a look at this query, you can see this is this logic app. There's 2 logic apps. The batch runs about 4 times a day, and it has maybe about 10 items in it. So in a 24-hour period, I've got nearly 6,000 events coming in. So that gives you an idea of the amount of data that gets pushed to your log analytics workspace. So while you can mine it and do some really powerful things with it, it's quite difficult to kind of work out exactly what the right queries are. But one of the quite good things that you can do if we go back over here is in the logic app itself. So we want this one here. You could use this tracked properties feature that so you can see here I could actually capture some properties and I could actually write them into the log analytics ones. You could see it. I think it should be this event here probably. All quick. Anyway, you can basically mine into those properties was one of the bits. So at a high level, that's a little bit of a view of what we've already had in log analytics. Now, what I really want to focus on is a couple of things we've been doing and some of the stuff that we'll get with App Insights that lets us do much more with this. So if we think about the jumping forward into the next demo, one of the first things that I've been doing is there's, in addition to the out-of-the-box collector, which is powerful, but it has loads of data. There's cost considerations about the volume of data going to log analytics. But the bit I really want to focus on is there's this thing called the Log Analytics Data Collector API, where I can send my own events to the workspace. And what that lets me do is I can now control some of the log events that are getting written rather than just take that massive stream of out-of-the-box stuff. So if you think the out-of-the-box stuff, I get a start and finish event for every single action in your logic app, start and finish for every trigger, and that's why there's so much data. But what I could do if I use the out-of-the-box connector for sending my own events, then I've got a bit more control over what goes to log analytics. So over here, if we go back to the resource scripts, I've got the same demo. You can see I've got the logic apps, I've got the event hub here. But what I can do instead, if we take a look at the Dataverse loading one, we've got this action that we've got available called send data, which lets me provide the details for a log analytics workspace, and then I can just craft my own JSON message, and I can actually send some properties. You can actually send a JSON object if you wanted to as one of the properties. So it's quite cool that you can actually just go, here's a message. There's some size restrictions on what you can send. And obviously there's a performance impact on the more data you send. But you can actually send quite lightweight messages and then you can mine into them in log analytics, which is quite cool. So that's how easy it is to start sending the data. So every time this logic app runs, I'd now get my own event written. And if you just see here, we've just said, basically logic app started. It's an info event. I've told it what the logic app name is, and then a bit of data from the actual message itself. So one of the challenges previously with the last one where I'm using track properties is you can only really use the properties on a given action. But here I can actually just create my own message and push that through, which is a little bit more, have a bit more control over it. Now, if we go back to the workspace here, so in this demo, I've got my own log now. So you can see here, I've created my custom log. And if we look at the data that's in here, there's a couple of things you'll notice. So firstly, there's not as many events, but also they're a bit more context sensitive to what I've actually logged rather than just having all that detail from the workflow runtime. So you can see here where we had those properties that I've written, they're just appearing as properties under that event. And I can start kind of like writing my own queries for some of this stuff now. So if I go and have a look, for example, at the Query Explorer over here, So I can write some queries and just save them. So if I want to do a query where I say, right, here's all the batches that I've received, I've saved my query. It gives me a really easy way of searching for events where I've decided I want to search for ones with the logic app name of batch supplier, where it contains the started message, and then I can just project with. So if you're writing a custo query, project lets you basically kind of bend the data so you determine what the columns that are output are. So I can say, here's a list of all the batches that I've received. This is the logic app ID. Here's the batch number. And that query, if you think about me receiving, say I've got 10 batch files a day coming in, each one has a different ID. Instead of having to dig through the logic apps to work out which one did which batch, I can just have my custo query here, and I can very easily pull out what the given ID was. I can also do things like, if this query would let me query for anything. So if I've had the Magic Dust company sends me Magic Dust ingredients, and I could go, well, let's look for all of the messages that came from the Magic Dust company. I can kind of run this, and I can say, right, well, here's all the messages that came from Magic Dust. They happen to be, so you can see here, I've got a couple of different batch files that they're in. I know the row within the batch file. I can jump over to the logic app ID, so I can go, right, well, I know it's this logic app, so if there was a problem or a query about their record, I know which logic app to go and look at, and I can kind of troubleshoot that quite easily. So the key thing around the custom connector is it gives you that bit more control about what you want to log, rather than just having to take it from the runtime. If we take a step back for a second, one of the other cool things we can do is when we've got this data in the log analytics workbooks, we can also now start creating these workbooks ourselves. So here I can create a workbook. In fact, I'll just show you how to get into this from the workspace. So in the workbook section here, you get some templates that Microsoft give you, but you can also create your own. So I've created this factory integration ingredients workbook, and I can just create some queries. So if we have a quick look at the edit here, so I can create a query here when it comes up. So that lets me put a widget on the workbook, and then I can just save it, and I can kind of create almost like a one-page dashboard of a bunch of different queries that tell me how my integrations are performing. So I think one of the good places you can use this is, if you've got like an app that does a bunch of different things, you can write 4 or 5 queries and say, so here I've got a list of, well, here's all the how many batches processed in the last 7 days, how many messages by supplier, here's a list of all the batches, and here's some of the recent messages if I wanted to kind of check any of the details of them. And really all the data that you see on here is just driven by that one action that just logged a bit of data from my logic app, and I can really make some much easier queries. You could potentially do some of this with some of the out-of-the-box stuff, but the queries you would have to write would be much, much more complicated, because you're going to have to mine in, find all the right events within the workflows, pull out your properties from those track properties, and it's just that much harder, whereas the data collector API lets you log what you want. Okay, so next up, we want to talk about App Insights. So I've kind of went quite quickly through the first two, because the one I wanted to spend the most time on is App Insights, because I think this is where things change a little bit with Logic Apps Standard. And I think there's a lot more that you can do with App Insights than you can with the log analytics stuff out of the box. And I think there's some quite cool stuff here. So what we're going to do now is we have the same demo again, but this time it's built with Logic Apps Standard instead of Logic Apps Consumption. So now we're running on an app service plan, and one of the features that we talked about earlier in the week is we can configure the Logic App plan to send stuff to App Insights. So as my workflow executes, a bit like with functions and stuff, we'll get a load of events going to App Insights. And what I want to show here is if we go back to the resource group, so with App Insights, I've got the same demo. We go into the factory ingredients workflows here. So to configure this, we just go to the App Insights setting, and we turn on App Insights, and we tell it which App Insights to send data to. Now this is really similar to the log analytics stuff in that everything from the workflow runtime goes to that App Insights space. So we're going to get a lot of data again, but there's still some quite cool stuff that we get from App Insights beyond log analytics. So if we have a quick look in here, you'll see in the designer there's no shapes that are specific to App Insights that we've added this time. It's all just out of the box stuff, but I do have on this shape down here, I do have the track properties set up again. So I can, I can kind of promote some, I guess it's a bit like in the BizTalk world, you would promote some properties that you want to be able to kind of track. So this demo is running it, and without going into too much detail about the Logic app itself, it's the exact same Logic app just done in Logic App Standard. But the bit that I want to focus on is what we can do in App Insights now that that's running. I guess maybe one thing to show is just show we've had a bit of traffic going through here. So you can see that there's been a bit of traffic every day running through, and again, like with Logic apps, we can still troubleshoot the history of it, just like we always can. But now we want to look across Logic apps and kind of see what deeper dive investigation we can do. So a couple of things first off, the out of the box App Insights features. So we get a lot of things for free here. So we can go and do things like the transaction search. So when your Logic apps are executing, you'll have a whole bunch of information going through. You're going to get trace messages and you're going to get request messages. So I think if we maybe look for something like this one here, so we'll open that up, and I think it was also demoed a little bit this week that you'll see when you open these up, you get this kind of timeline showing the different actions, and really what you're going to get here is in App Insights you'll get one request message and one trace message for every action that runs within your workflow. So again, there's quite a lot of data coming in here, but because the sort of data coming in as telemetry is much more connected than it was in Logic apps, you get things like this view here where you can see the history of what's been going on, which is quite cool. So the if first step you could probably do is if we wanted to find, say, because I was promoting those track properties, I can probably do a search now for just magic, and I can go and find this should be a trace message, which should have something to do with magic dust in. So if we look on the right over here, you'll see we've got a message telling us what was ran. If we go further down, you'll see in this properties section down here, I think it'll be, we should see that the from highlighted here, that tells us that it came, that message came from the Magic Dust Mining Company. So that's one way I can just go and do like a fuzzy search of everything running through my Logic apps and look for something, which, it's quite a powerful feature if you wanted to just go, just do a random search across all of your Logic apps to find something with an ID number in it or something's quite a powerful feature. So in addition to the transaction search, I think Matthias in the previous sessions showed a little bit about live metrics. I think you might have been doing it in a custom code kind of scenario, but you will be able to get this. It's a really cool feature to see the performance of how your plan's running in real time. I'm not going to really go into this too much today, but just know that when you're troubleshooting the runtime performance, this is definitely one of the areas I expect people will be looking at to see, how much activity is going on in my system at any one point in time. The bit that I want to talk about next, though, a little bit is the application map. So again, this has been touched on a little bit, and I'll have to stretch the time back a bit. And you get this visual of kind of what's going on. One of the things I want to say, I'm going to dive into the data that's under the hood for this in a minute, but one of the biggest constraints I think people will find on this, while it's really cool, this bit over here is a bit of a problem for me, because that tells me my Logic apps are calling out to the API hub. So that's actually calling CRM or Dataverse, but actually like anything with an Azure connector is going to be on that API hub. And I'm not sure it's really easy to differentiate between the different connectors yet. So I expect this is an area Microsoft will be doing more sort of deep dive stuff on to make that more valuable. So the bit that I really wanted to focus on is starting to look at these logs within App Insights to see some of what we can do with them. So one of the things to know is in App Insight, that's a little bit different to log analytics. Previously, we had the Azure diagnostic log, and we had our own custom log. The stuff we're going to get in App Insights is really going to be split across a few of these different logs. So the first one's going to be the request log. And we'll see in here that, basically every action pretty much has a request item logged here. And you can see if we open it up, you'll get some information about, how long, which action it was, how long it took to run, which operation it was, and things like that. Now, to be able to mine this to do some useful stuff, you need to understand a little bit about what the structure of this log is. So things like the operation name, I think that if you dive into the custom dimensions on some of them a bit, you get things like which logic app it would be, and that kind of thing. And I'll show some queries I've kind of built in a minute, but really this is like the durations and the success of each action is pretty much what you're going to get in the request log. The trace log's the one that I've found to be quite useful for a lot of stuff as well. So here you're going to get a bunch of stuff. So you get the host runtime stuff, but you also get, again, these execution of a start and end trigger and a bunch of other stuff. And what I'm going to show in a minute is in the Query Explorer, I've got some saved queries where we can mine into this and get some really good stuff out of it. I think another couple of queries just to show before that is you've also got things like in the performance log. So if I just bring that one in, you can see some of the counters that get logged by App Insights. You can get a bit of history about the history of your different metrics like processor time and stuff. And one of the queries I've got, so I'll just grab this one, is so I can quite easily run a query with a time chart. So one of the powerful things about Custo is that you can render your data into different visualizations. So you can just have a table, you can have a chart, etc. So I can quite easily just run a query and I get the CPU performance of my app plan over a period of time, which is quite cool. Now, the other one that I find is really handy as well is dependencies. So this is really, dependencies is what the application map's based on. So you can see here, if we just look at what's in the log, you can see I've got the targets, which is where my calls are going out to. So you can see this one's going to be the, I think that's the event hub. We've got the one here, the API hub, and you can see over here that you can tell it's a common data service one. Now, what we can do is if we go and dig into it a bit. So one of the queries I've got is a way of kind of bending this. So I get a summary of how many, in the last 24 hours, how many calls have I had to each of my dependencies. So I can kind of visualize that. I can also do things like project the time. So if I want, say we take this query here, so if you think this is going to be across all of my logic apps as well. So here I've got a query where I'm going to look at the dependencies. I'm going to pull out the workflow name and the action name. And then I'm going to look for ones where the duration's longer than a second. So this will tell me all of the dependencies that took longer than a second to run. Which, if you've got, let's say we've got 100 logic apps running, this gives me a way of working out which actions in which workflow could be the bottleneck and which services are they going to call. So this starts getting really powerful, and we can kind of do some good analytics about troubleshooting a performance issue in our logic apps. This data is the place we're probably going to start looking. Now, if we have a look, next up I've got a query where I want to look for some of those custom properties that I've got. And this is where you'll probably look and go, that's a bit of a scary query, which it kind of is in a way, but I'm going to show you in a second one of the quite handy little tips on this one. So here we're looking at the trace log, you can see at the start, and we're going to extend out. So when we do an extend, we're creating a new column based on something in that data set. So extends a way you can kind of make the query easier. So you can extend the columns you want. So here I'm going to break into this custom dimensions element within the log event and pull out the action property. and that's going to be my action name, so I can just make my query easier. So I'm going to pull out these properties, and then I'm going to do a where to make sure it's the one that has tracked properties, and then I'm just going to project them out. And you can see here by bending that data a little bit, I can scroll over the right and I can see I've got easy access to my tracked properties here. I can see things like how long they ran, and you know, I can easily go and find those track properties. Now, one of the things I could do is, so a little tip for when you're learning to write these queries, if you click this little ellipsis button, I can actually like just add that as a query filter like that, or I could add it as a property like that. So that's the best way to start learning to get familiar with a query kind of language that we've got. Okay, so after we've mined the logs a bit, we understand a little bit about what's in them. The next thing is workbooks. So what I can do, and this is where I think Microsoft will probably start doing some investment in this. They've got loads of great data going in here. So I can actually do some stuff with these workbooks. And a couple of things I can do. So dependency analysis. I've put a workbook here where I've just got a couple of queries where it shows me, here's a simple list of my dependencies and how often they get used. Here's a visualization of them, and it's like my kind of one pager about my logic app dependencies. The next one, if I take a look, say if we look at the trace ones. So here I can get things like, here's a list of the types of trace events we've got, so you can see how many functions completed, workflow actions completed. So that's really about the logic app completion versus the action completing. I've got how many trace events by logic app. Was that how many successful logic apps they are? So that at the minute they're all succeeding, but I would see how many had passed and failed. Now, if you think about it, one of the big challenges at the minute with logic apps, if I've got 100 logic apps, how do I do a query that told me what was the success and failure of all of them in one list? That's quite challenging to do at the minute, but you know, you can quite easily do that here. And just to show you under the hood, it's the workbooks is really the same as the log analytics we looked at earlier. We've just got these queries in. So you can do a lot more with these. One of the things I'll just say, I've just in the interest of time, I'm going to jump on to the next bit. I have got a lot in the integration playbook going through this in much lower level detail. I just really wanted to give a flavor of what's available and hopefully encourage people to go and go through the playbook to read more. Okay, so next up we've got a bit of BAM. So what we're going to do this time is we've got the same demo again, but as well as all the other options, we can send stuff out to BAM, and it's similar to what Saravana showed in the previous session. We can put some actions in our logic app, we can send out to BAM, and we can create this kind of business-friendly, sort of non-integration expert-friendly view of what's happening in our logic apps. So just to start off with, let's have a quick look at how we do that. So over here, we've got our logic apps. Let's get rid of a couple of screens here for a minute. So we've got our logic apps. You can see I've got my my event hub here. I've got my logged dataverse and my batch processor again. The one thing that's different, this is a consumption logic app in this case. So there's the custom connector I've added, which points to my BAM API. And what I can do in my logic app is I can go, and in here I've got a start transaction shapes. That lets me say to BAM, there's a transaction within a business process. So I've got my factory ingredients business process. I want you to start an instance of the process ingredient transaction. I give it a bit of information about what's starting. And then as we go through BAM, through the logic app, eventually I'll put checkpoints in. So what you usually would have in the most common scenario would be a start transaction, then various checkpoints until it's done. So I would just be saying, here's an update to that transaction and it was successful or not. Now, the key difference between BAM and all the other stuff we've looked at before is the other stuff's really like a log of things happening. and there's not really a big connection between the telemetry events. They're just going in there, and you can kind of query into them and create visualizations and stuff. But the big difference in BAM, which I've managed to log myself out as serverless here, so let's just log back in. There we go. Perfect demo gremlin that. Okay, right, so there's BAM up. So the big difference in BAM is I've got a business process here, but what you're doing with BAM is you're creating an expectation of the process that you want to run, and then you map your events to it. So all the other ones, you're just sending events out, but there's no kind of expectation of what they should look like. So here we've created a the design time. So I've put some shapes on here. You can see we create almost like an activity diagram in a way. And what I'm also able to do is I can do things like properties. So here I've configured some properties. Saravana was showing how, I've got these coming in from a header from my logic app. You can do them from the message body. One of the really cool things as well, actually, is if you send a message body from your logic app, you can actually add a property at runtime without redeploying anything. So you can just pull another property out if you find it's useful. You can also configure reprocessing. So I can have it, I think I need to be on the other process actually. So let's jump onto this one. So here I can configure a processing step, which I'll show in a minute, which means if my process is being looked at by the business user or the support operator and there was a problem, we can give them an opportunity to self-serve and resubmit stuff without having to contact the integration team, which is one of the most popular features. But the idea is that I create this process of this is what's going to happen. And then at runtime, we'd have the events coming in from the logic app. And we can see here's all the history of what's been going on. We've received events. So if we have a quick look at the transaction type here, you can see I've got my process ingredients and my process batch. And you can see I've got things like the batch item. I can click on one, I can open it up, and I can see some of the details about what happened. So we've got things like the properties available here. And so, as an example here, you can see I've got things like the batch item again. And it just gives me this way, the whole idea of BAM is it gives me this way that I can let somebody who's not an integration expert have visibility into how this integration is running, and they can troubleshoot some of this stuff. We've got things like some of the features that are quite popular is action required. So in my demo, I deliberately make it have an error every now and again. So here I can go in and I can say, right, instead of having to dig through and find all the errors and how do I know when I've troubleshot them, I can say, right, well, I know this one that ran yesterday had an error. I can go in and have a look and I can say, oh, well, what happened? I might have decided to archive a message to BAM. If it's as an optional thing, you can choose to archive if you want. And I can have a look at what the message actually looks like and decide if I want to repair it or not. So here's, there's the broken message. And what I might choose to do, so there's a couple of things here. I might say, right, well, I'm going to go for lunch. So I want to save that one as a favorite and come back to it later. So if you imagine you're getting a few hundred logic app runs every hour, how do you find the one that was the error when you go back to the Azure portal is one of the big problems. So I can just go back to my favorites and I can say, oh, there's the favorite I saved. I can easily find it again. Also from action required, I can maybe do this reprocess. So if I have a look at my transaction here, I say, yeah, you know what, it was just a transient error. Let's just resubmit that for processing. So I've got on the started shape, I've got an ability to republish it back to a logic app, and I can just send that off. And the good thing is now I know that that's been done, it should be taken out of the action required because you've taken action. And the two actions we expect people to take would be either to resubmit it or ignore it. So one of the other things I could have done is said, actually, I've manually addressed this issue, ignore this item. And really my action required is like a to-do list of what things do I need to do to keep this interface up to date. And if we go back through here, we should see down here is the one that I've just reprocessed, and see it's got a little tag telling me that it got reprocessed, so I know it's been sorted out. And that just lets me keep on top of making sure everything's good. The final bit to mention about BAM is we also have this dashboard feature. So with the messages coming in about how it's going, I can create this this friendly dashboard so I can see what's going on, and it's easy for the business user or the IT second line, first line support to manage your solution without having to be an Azure Logic App expert or an App Insights expert. It's just that simpler view of it. Now, I think we'll start wrapping up now because I think we're kind of getting quite near the end. So just to compare the solutions, a couple of things. So a little view by technology of where you can use each of the approaches. So the out-of-the-box Logic apps, out-of-the-box log analytics can be used in a few places. You can push data to log analytics. The Logic App Management solution is only available for consumption Logic apps and ICE. It's also still preview as well after a few years, so I would expect that'll be something Microsoft wouldn't invest in because it makes more sense they invest in App Insights. The Log Analytics Data Collector API, you can kind of use that from a lot of different things quite easily. So if you can use it from Flow, you can use it from all the different flavors of Logic apps, and it's a good way of custom logging. I think one of the things I hope, if anyone from Microsoft's listening, if you could give us a connector that does that but writes to the App Insight custom log instead, that would be very nice, because then for Logic App Standard, it lets me have that ability to write my own message. App Insights is available on a number of different stuff, and I think the one with Serverless 360 BAM, you can use that from all of the different technologies, but I've got the Logic App Standard as yellow. You can do it with the HTTP connector if you wanted to, but I think at the minute there's a bit of a gap on Logic App Standard about custom connectors and API management integration, which I think would affect a little bit about how people might use it. So we're hoping to be able to do a little bit of investment to make that a bit smoother, but you can do it just in a slightly different way. Who was each of the texts really aimed at then? So I think this is the real big thing about understanding who's going to benefit from which of the approaches I've shown. So the out-of-the-box stuff's really aimed at, the log analytics out of the box for Logic apps, those raw logs and App Insights is really about people who know what they're doing, people who will be listening on integrate sessions. That's where you can deep dive on these logs and find out, what's going on, and you can troubleshoot all sorts of different problems, and it's really fantastic stuff, a gold mine of data. The App Insights workbooks and the Log Analytics workbooks, I think, are something you might give to a moderately experienced IT support operator, because they'll be able to see quite easily what's going on, but you're going to need to be inside Azure. You're going to need to be able to navigate around a little bit. And the bit where we saw Serverless 360 BAM coming in is really for that first line IT support, business users, people who don't really know much about integration but do care about the solution. You can give them visibility. One of the great things on my project I've been on is we've been able to give testers and business analysts access to BAM, and it's probably taken away about 40% of the integration team having to support integration solutions during testing by letting them kind of self-manage it and do self-service with BAM. So there's a good opportunity there. The Lex, I think we're running out of time quite quick. Am I okay for another couple of minutes, or do you want me to wrap up?
No, well, officially we've ran out of time indeed, but we still have time to take some questions, right?
Perfect. So I think I've covered most of what's in that slide anyway. So one thing I do want to call out is the blog post and the integration playbook articles. The links are on the screen, and I'll just show over here. So if you're in the integration playbook, the ops and monitoring section, so there's about 4 or 5 pages here. So it walks through what I've talked about. I'm going to go through in more detail some of the pros and cons of each of the approaches. And like, if you take the App Insights ones, I've got who's going to use it, how to do it, and then I've got a lot of the queries I've shown and a lot of the additional queries that I think people will find useful. I've kind of got them in here so you can see examples of them, and really just really the call to action, I guess, is for people to go and see what you can do and share queries that other people will find useful. Should I jump to the Q&A, Alex? There's a few in here.
A number of questions in the.
So I think what question from is what's the future of the Logic App Management solution? I think it's there. You can use it. I haven't really found, if I'm really honest, I haven't really found it that useful. But and I don't think Microsoft are going to be investing in it because I think their investments will be done into Logic App, into App Insights. The standard data collectors label preview. I don't know when that'll be GA. We've been using it. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. So I think one of the things we did in the real world is we actually just wrapped it with API management, the API under the hood, because it just meant the configuration was a bit easier when you're using it on a few different Logic apps. But yeah, that connector is a preview marked connector. Is there a limit on how long logs are stored? So that's a really great question. For App Insights and Log Analytics, you configure that in the Log Analytics and App Insights solution. And there's a bit more complexity, I guess, with App Insights because you can connect App Insights to a Log Analytics workspace, which is the way kind of Microsoft sort of talk about setting it up now. So the idea is you can bring multiple different groups of logs together, but you just configure your log retention. I think the key thing is, bear in mind there's a lot of log data goes in there, and the longer you keep it, the more you're going to pay for it. Is there a tool for executing queries over the log? If no, how about if we create a dash? Do you know, I don't think there is a cost for querying. I haven't checked that, but I'm pretty sure when I've looked, I don't think there is. I think you pay more for volume of data stored over what period is, I think, the cost model for both of them. But it might be worth checking that out because I don't remember seeing anything about that. Please show how you clear these logs. So you don't clear them basically as far. I think you can delete a log, but I don't think you can delete the custom. The logs in App Insights and the out of the box logs you probably can't delete, but the custom ones I think you probably can. But I might have to look into that a bit more. How do stateless Logic apps and tracked properties work? It's a really great question. I haven't actually tried that. I would guess if you're pushing it to App Insights, it probably still works, I would guess. But I think we'd have to check that and get back to you. But great question. Is it possible to mask properties? I don't think you can, but you could probably do something custom to mask them if you wanted to do that on top of it, but you'd obviously have to unmask them when you query it. I think they're going to be stored securely under the hood, with like the encryption at rest that Microsoft uses. But I think if you've got access to read the logs, so you probably don't want to log sensitive data into the into those logs. Why are those log services too expensive? Yeah, anonymous users got a good comment there. It is, that is the danger. I think I've talked to a few people about that in the past about, it can get quite expensive. So the question is, how much do you and don't you log? And that's one of the things I do like about that custom approach of choosing when you log. And what I tend to find is with the out-of-the-box log analytics and App Insights capabilities, the fact you can turn them on and off. So on a consumption Logic apps, you can turn log analytics off on a per Logic app basis. So that's going to be per workflow, whereas the Logic app standard, it's going to be on the app itself. So I think people probably need to be conscious of the fact you maybe, especially at high volume, you probably don't want it turned on all the time. But I think it depends. The more you're going to log, the more it's going to cost is the key thing. When to use one versus the other. So hopefully, Ahmed, I've talked a little bit about your question about the differences. Feel free to go through the articles, though, where I go into a bit more detail, just conscious of time, and feel free to reach out if there's any bits you want to chat about. Do you think the solutions are sufficient for production environment to get a holistic view of your integration environment? So I think the key question there is, so are the solutions sufficient for a production environment to get a holistic view of your integration environment, or would you recommend a third-party solution like serverless or 360 or Datadog? So I think really what I'm kind of using in the real world is a combination. So I think it's about the right thing for the right use case. So I think log analytics and app insights give me that low level kind of deep dive data that I can get a really good view across the board. But I think there's particularly serverless 360, I think getting that operations view of certain apps and getting that business self-service view from BAM, they're where they really add a lot of value. I'm not as familiar with Datadog, to be really honest, but I think it's probably similar things where they're going to be, just using the same data probably in Datadog. I'm thinking it's more of like a visualization of those logs. But I think for me in the real world, the thing I'm using at the minute is serverless BAM, app insights, and log analytics with the custom bits, the three things. Yes, so it's a really good point by Tom. So App Insights performs sampling at high load. So basically the idea of App Insights is under extreme load conditions, it'll sample, so you won't necessarily transactionally get all of your data. It would rather your process ran through and the telemetry was dropped off. So there is no 100% guarantee yet telemetry will definitely get captured. So I think you do have to bear that in mind. So if you're looking at that as an auditability thing, I don't think that's what App Insights and Log Analytics guarantee. I think it's much more about performance and visualization and operations. It's not an audit thing, but certainly that's one of the cases where BAM probably comes in if you're looking for, kind of that proper. It's part of your process to track. When did you receive batches and that kind of thing? That's probably much more for that use case. Log the whole message body to so for reprocessing a message from Andy, if you want to reprocess with BAM, yes, you do have to send BAM the message to be reprocessed. So there's a way you can do that in the connector, which lets you say, here's a message body. You have to choose to archive it, and you can then use it for resubmission, and you can actually repair it and resubmit it as well if you wanted to. Restrict data collected by log analytics. It seems that. So Ronnie asks about guidance to reduce the amount of data. So I think the key thing for reducing the amount of data is deciding which logic apps to turn it on and which ones to turn it off. I don't think you really want it for everything. So certain logic, and one of the things I would do, especially with the out of the box stuff, is once you're happy with your solutions and they're running quite well, especially if they're chatty, you might only turn it on when they're a problem. And it might also be a case of that might influence a decision about which workflow you put into which app, so you can kind of control that a bit better. So there's a couple of design choices you might want to make. But I think being aware of the fact that there is a lot of data being potentially logged, I think is quite important. Lex, should we wrap up there, or is there? I think that's the last of the questions.
We're almost there, right?
Yeah, I hope everyone found that really useful, and it's I've got lots of stuff in the playbook on this area, and feel free to give me a shout if anybody wants to sort of bounce a few ideas around about stuff. Thanks.
Covey.co